This is GM Construct. Specifically, this is version 13 of Construct. Kind of. Not really. We'll get to that later. It's one of the most recognizable maps in gaming, and for good reason. And with the Steam Workshop, you can get this map in any flavor you want. Do you want it to be nighttime? Want your construct to be snowy? How about neon? This one's a personal favorite of mine. And you know what? Let's just flash through a few more of these here. And, wow. There really are a lot of these. And I think the fact that there are so many different versions of Construct proves that this is a great map. I mean, if it wasn't a good map, people wouldn't want to replicate it so much, right? Anyway, back to the normal Construct. My point is, this map is iconic, and it might just be the perfect sandbox map. Every single aspect of the modern version of Construct is built perfectly to synergize with the gameplay of Gary's mod. Want to build a vehicle? There's plenty of space to drive around with both flat areas and hills, in addition to the water portion, which is obviously great for boats. As well as a massive amount of space in the sky to fly around if you want to take your building to, well, the skies. Or maybe instead of vehicles, you're looking to construct other things. There are a wide array of indoor spaces in Construct, each with their own unique properties. There's this building with a large number of floors, each with plenty of floor space. And then there's this building, with a massive amount of vertical space in case you want to build your own floors. Maybe you want to have your base be high up, but also less accessible. Well, this building sounds like the perfect fit for you. Okay, but maybe you want to add your own lighting. Then the dark room is the space for you. This room feels like a big stage, and comes equipped with a massive mirror so you can see what you look like. This room has walls that can be any color you want them to be. Me personally, I like hot pink. And you know what, I could go on about every room, but I think you get the point. Whatever you want to build, wherever you want to build it, you can do it. It's a great sandbox in that way. You can make Construct into whatever you want it to be. And this can be shown by the many, many, many saves on the map, and people have been very creative throughout the years. But let's be honest, the majority of people probably just use this map to see how many Combine soldiers it takes to kill Freddy Fazbear. And you know what? That's a completely valid use case, because this map is great for that too. The way the hills are constructed, along with the buildings, makes this a great map for NPC battles. Or maybe you want to bring some friends along and have some fun. And by have some fun, I of course mean whatever the hell this is. No, I'm not winning this fight.
You bite. Commit. Oh my god, no! No! That's fucked up, bro.
Guess what? This map is great for that too. Okay, yeah, you can have fun with friends on any map, at least if you have good friends. But GM Construct is a great map to do it on. With where the spawns are set, a lot of fighting happens around this building complex. This building is also good for fighting in. But if you and your friends are more of the peace-loving type, this map can also be used for racing, or hide-and-seek, or collaborative building projects. Or, you know, anything you can put your mind to. Again, it's a great sandbox, and when you bring some friends along, anything can happen.
Go.
Oh, now it's body goals.
Yeah.
It looks like an acorn. Now, I could go on and on about different ways to use construct, and to be honest, I kind of did do that. Maybe I got a little ahead of myself. So let's take a step back for a moment and just listen. From what I can tell, these soundscapes are specific to Construct, meaning they don't come from Half-Life 2 or any other source game. These sounds were made specifically for GM Construct, and I think they fit the map really well. When discussing the feeling/vibe that Construct gives, people often say it's creepy, especially being alone on an empty server with nothing loaded in. And I think this is related to the whole liminal space phenomenon. And I'm sure a lot of you know what a liminal space is, but for the uninitiated, a liminal space is essentially a place of transition, and it's often attributed to photos of places that are typically bustling with people, but in these photos they are devoid of life. Nostalgia also plays a big factor into the eeriness of liminal spaces. Places that seemed so magical when you were a kid, now so bleak and empty. Playing in GM Construct on single player with no mods or NPCs walking around can qualify as a liminal space, as Construct is often so full of things and people that when you take that all away, it can feel like there's something missing. There's also certain sections themselves that are just eerie just by their existence. The best example of this is the dark room. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is just a room for adding lighting, but that doesn't stop it from being creepy on its own. Just a giant dark room. There's also the whole myth about seeing a dark figure lurking in the corners of the map, and even some mods that make it real. Of course, different horror series on YouTube play around with this concept and embrace the eeriness of this map. But all that being said, I actually don't find this map to be all that creepy. Maybe I did at some point, but honestly, just loading into an empty server and just listening, I find it very relaxing. I want to smell the grass. I want to feel the wind. I want to dip a toe into the waters. Unfortunately, every time I look up GM Construct Real, it's disappointing. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you feel like GM Construct is eerie or relaxing? Or somewhere in the middle? Or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. Now, I want you to think for a second about what makes GM Construct so iconic. Is it the large buildings, the green hills, the lake, the garage, the dark room, the mirror room? Well, what if I told you that none of those things were in the original version of Construct? No, instead it was just a white void. In fact, the name Construct likely comes from the fact that this looks so similar to The Construct, which is a place in the Matrix series. It has a few random props here and there, and I'm not really sure what the purpose of these are. Maybe these are for messing around with the primitive version of the physics gun. So I'm editing this video. I forgot to mention that there's a couch back here. So there are props over there, but there's also a couch here. I forgot to get footage of that, so there it is. There's also a physical spawn menu with actual in-game buttons to spawn ragdolls and props. Because Gmod was not a game yet and was still just a mod of Half-Life 2, there was no menu spawn menu. The last area is this hallway, which was once used to load different levels from Half-Life 2, but this feature doesn't really work anymore. Next up is GM Construct 3, with a bit more room and new textures. Construct is finally starting to look like the map we know today, at least in terms of textures. Layout-wise, it's still incredibly basic. Then, the next iteration, we get some more room. A new garage with a jeep and an airboat parked inside, and a spawner for basic building blocks. With the next version, we get a bit more variety in terms of layout, with a raised walkway, a pool of disgusting looking water, and even a hill. This map was the first version of Construct to feature a 3D skybox, with some very primitive looking buildings that would eventually become the skybox buildings we all know and love. The next version expands the map even more, gives us water in a more natural formation instead of a pool, although it still doesn't look very drinkable. And it's also the first version to include this building, although the roof looks slightly different, with some square holes instead of the slanted slots we have today. This version also includes a primitive version of the dark room. And, of course, more hills. The 7th version is the first to have a real city-like appearance. Oh, and also this building now has a white room in addition to a black room. Now, the black room is not to be confused with the dark room. This is a black room, not just a dark room. Got it? Good. Next version finally removes the hallway with the Half-Life 2 buttons to make space for more vehicles in the garage, as well as adding these grass sprites. Like, everywhere. Did someone forget to mow the lawn? There's also a side entrance to this building now, and I think the buildings in the skybox look slightly different, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Version 9 finally removed the building block spawner, brought windows to the garage, and put bigger buildings in the skybox, which would eventually become the buildings you could enter in the final version. Due to these buildings being added, I'd say this is where Construct really starts to look like the modern version. Like, if you squint your eyes, you can kinda see it. Though I'd say this version is a lot more bleak than the modern version, being more foggy and gray. They still need to mow the lawn though, which is exactly what they do in version 10. This is the beginning of the transition from the more foggy and gloomy appearance of 9 to the more colorful and clear appearance of 13. And honestly, I could see it being a toss-up as to which one you prefer. Although personally, I'm glad they went for the more colorful approach, as I believe it probably helped with the longevity of the final version. The gloomy aesthetic of 9 kind of gets tiring to look at after a while. Anyway, the changes this time are pretty big, at least on the garage side of things. Now the garage is an actual building with a roof instead of being inside a wall. This is also where the dock section was introduced. On the other side of the map, this building gets its upper entrance and adds this strange lighting room thing. Yeah, I'm not really sure what this is supposed to be. Looks kinda cool, I guess, though kinda. Next up is version 12? Yeah, this is where the disparity begins. You see, this is the version of Construct featured in both Gmod 11 and Gmod 12. And this add-on made by Gary that showcases all of the old versions of Construct, this one is called version 12, so that's what I'll be calling it. This version looks a lot more colorful with greener grass and delicious looking water. There's now stairs to get onto the roof of the garage, and the white void room is finally colorable. Hot pink room, here I come. It also has this weird light switch thing, which I just found out is actually in the final version of Construct, just on the side of the wall here. I legitimately did not know about this light switch before making this video. And then we get to version 13, which has an interesting story to it. There's one area I neglected to mention in the initial tour section of this video. If you crouch under this ramp here, you can find a secret little area. One of the more notable things about this section is a credit to the developers that worked on this version of Construct. Facepunch was gearing up for version 13 of Gmod to release, and a few developers at Facepunch wanted to update Construct. Not Gary himself though, although he was cool with the idea as long as he, liked the final version. So these developers posted on the now defunct Facepunch forums, thankfully we have archive.org. Basically, they opened up this thread to the Gmod community, and implemented changes based on community feedback. And they got plenty of feedback. This led to some very wacky experimental versions of Construct. Luckily, we still have access to these versions today. So, let's take a look at how GM Construct 13 evolved to become the map we know and love today. Now, we're not going to take a look at every single version, as there are way too many to go over in one video, and not all of them are interesting. So instead, we'll take a look at one version from each month of the 8-month development cycle. I'm sure I'll be missing some important parts of the development history by only looking at certain versions, but that's a compromise we're going to have to make, because this video is already getting longer than I wanted it to be. Here is what I believe to be the very first version of GM Construct 13. I'm sure the first thing you'll notice is how different the lighting looks, as well as having a different skybox. I honestly think this version looks pretty cool in terms of lighting, though I do understand the appeal of having something more neutral than this as a base map. Honestly, this version is so close to the final version of 13 in terms of layout that rather than naming what's here, it would be easier to name what's missing. Let's start with the 3D skybox, which is a lot more simple with no green hills. It's very immersion breaking if you go any higher than the ground floor. There's no area underneath the dock, and the shores of the water are not yet sandy. The dock itself also has a slightly different texture to it. The garage's interior looks mostly the same, but the way it connects to the neighboring building doesn't. Also, there isn't a room higher up in this building yet. This building in the corner has no interior. Meanwhile, this building has a very different interior, with different textures, as well as an open section on each floor, and a ladder that can go from one floor to the next and even to the roof. Pretty neat. In the current version, there's no way to access these other floors easily without no-clipping, and I honestly like the version of this building more than the final version. I like that you can actually traverse to different floors. This section has a raised walkway to get to the side entrance of the darkroom, and from what I can tell, the darkroom itself is pretty close to the final version. The mirror room is a lot smaller, and has these light switches, which I did check, and they are not there in the final version. I've been fooled by light switches before, so I had to check. And, of course, there's no secret room yet. This is surprisingly close to the final version of the map, but I promise things will get more wacky from here. The changes this time are relatively minor. The way the garage connects to the neighboring building resembles the current version much more, though it has these weird support arches that you can bump into. The building with multiple floors no longer has the open floor design. They got rid of the raised walkway here. There's an entire system of underground tunnels that connects a lot of the major areas in the map to one another, which also adds a few new rooms and sections. Oh, and also there's doors on the colorable room that shut behind you and make it hard to find the exit. But, nothing major. Alright, fine, let's talk about the tunnels. They're honestly really cool. They connect the dark room, the garage, this room underneath the dock area that you can get to from the lake. This interior area. And even an interior for this building, though it still doesn't have a ground entrance yet. It features these staircases which eventually lead to the roof. Honestly, I love the way the tunnels look in this version, from the textures to the lighting. As cool as these are, though, I understand why they were eventually scrapped. It would be confusing for new players trying to navigate the map, and it strays pretty far from any published version of Construct in terms of design. The base map, the map that comes with the game, should be pretty simple by design and intuitive to navigate, and these tunnels are neither of those things. I read through a bit of the archived forum thread because I wanted to find out whose idea it was to have these tunnels here, and to my surprise it was actually Gary himself. And it was also his idea to close off the floors in this building. Why, Gary? Why? In fact, a lot of the changes from the first version to now were based on Gary's input, which makes sense, but it's much to the chagrin of the community who felt like their feedback was being ignored in favor of Gary's. But you know, he's the developer. I mean, he's Gary. That's his name on the game. It's completely understandable why the developers are listening to him above anyone else. Let's take a look at where they take this concept from here. This build was labeled Tunnel Test, and I wonder why. Let's take a look at the... oh. Yeah, the tunnels sure are being tested. I looked in Hammer, and the walls appear to be a texture called Blend Rock Slime 2A, which is not in the textures for Gmod. There are a few interesting things to note here, though. The tunnel system no longer connects to most of the map, including the dark room, the corner skyscraper's interior, and the room underneath the dock. They still haven't removed those stupid doors from the colorable room, though, and for some reason the ground isn't colorable in this version. Yeah, I guess the nature of these experimental versions is that sometimes they're pretty broken. Let's hope June is better. In this version, a new 3D skybox was added with missing textures. Ugh. Okay, if we can look past that, we can actually see that this 3D skybox looks quite a bit different from the final version. This version has more foliage, and also some industrial-looking buildings. The final version goes for a more simple approach. Let's check up on how the tunnels are coming along, and... oh, they're gone already? Oh man, I missed those tunnels. I mean, I get why they were removed, but I missed them. You know what? Screw the script. You know what? Let's look at more tunnels. Let's go back to March. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. A unique tunnel build. This one features an even earlier version of the tunnels than I showed before, and they look a lot more simple in this version. Oh, and it also shows that the mirror room used to connect to the tunnel system as well. And inside this building, there weren't even any stairs yet. It's officially July, and by now it's pretty safe to say that the experimental phase of this map's development is over, and now we're on to the refinement stage. There are two big differences between this build and the one we looked at in June, the more obvious one being lighting. It looks a lot more blue. There's also a weird shadow thing going on in the hangar. The lighting was also changed in this building, which is slowly transforming into its modern version. The other difference is more subtle though, and it's that the map itself is slightly larger. And from this angle you can also notice the sand being added to the lake. Alright, let's see what August has in store, and there's no sky. Well, the issue appears to stem from the fact that this version of the map uses a sky named Flatgrass, one that's not in the game anymore. The current version uses a sky named Painted, and if you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna... yeah. Much better. This build is special, as it was the version of Construct put in the Gmod 13 beta release. They removed the stupid doors from the white room, pink room, and they removed the light switches from the mirror room, as well as the ceiling light props in favor of just having light entities with no prop. They changed the side entrance to the dark room, and it looks very similar to the modern version. They added the upper floor to this building, and I swear the lights inside here are slightly bluer. On the bottom floor, they removed the weird support things in this turn corner. This corner skyscraper finally has its front entrance, and looks pretty much the same as the modern version on the inside. Except, strangely, there's a room between the top of this interior and the roof of the building, and it has some odd lighting thing going on. I have no clue what this is at all. This version of Construct is very close to the version we have today, the biggest difference being how blue it is, and the 3D skybox being full of foliage. So, the changes from here on out will be a lot more minor, so let's just flash through these last 2 months. The September build was also missing its skybox, so I replaced that too. There were 3 big things that I noticed that were changed since the August version. First is this ramp up to the roof of the garage. Second is these windows on the top story of this building. And lastly, the stairs to the dark room were made much darker. Like I said, there were a lot more refining changes than experimental ones in this era. Here we are. Now, this is not the final version, but rather one of the last beta builds of Construct. They finally added the new sky, which luckily means I did not have to modify this version. The soundscapes had finally been added. The roof of this building has finally had its bars thickened. They added floor numbers to this building. They expanded the mirror room and re-added the ceiling light props. Added this light above the dark room entrance. Removed the weird top room of this building. Toned down the saturation of the lighting in this room. And added the credits room, though it looks slightly different. I guess the big question is, what's so different about this version when compared to the final version? Well, again, it's the lighting and the skybox. Much like with the difference in vibes between GM Construct 9 and 13, I can see it being a toss-up as to which vibe you prefer, the 13 beta or the 13 final. I guess it all comes down to whether you love the color blue or not. Personally, I think they nailed it on the head appearance-wise with the final version. So, what's the big takeaway from looking at the history of this map? Well, I think what we just witnessed was the molding of GM Construct into the Perfect Sandbox Map. They tried to add wacky new areas and subsections, but ultimately, what won was simplicity, intuitiveness. When I first loaded into GM Construct as a new player, I had no trouble finding and making use out of the various areas. It really is like the Goldilocks of sandbox maps. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's not too simple, and it's certainly not too complex. And this is all thanks to these folks and their hard work. Without these people, we would not have the GM construct we have today. So thank you. But, like, come on, did you really have to remove the open floor design for this building? Come on, it was so cool. Why'd you remove it? So, what is the legacy of GM Construct? Well, in addition to being the playground for countless sessions of Gmod to many, many, many players, it's also the setting to countless classic YouTube videos. And, wow, I really need to stop using Markiplier as my example footage. This is the third video in a row in which I do that. Okay, find something that's not Markiplier. Oh, you know what? This looks like kind of a fun video. Let's use this. GM Construct has been the setting for many, many YouTube videos, from fun and silly animations to friends having fun together, and even brain rot content. I really mean it when I call GM Construct one of the most iconic maps in gaming. I'm sure even many non-gamers would tell you that they recognize this map if you showed a picture of it to them, even if they couldn't name it. The imagery of the concrete buildings, the blue sky, and the green hills is very iconic. And it looks great on a jacket. Very drippy. This map has a very unique place in the gaming sphere as a whole. To call it influential would seem strange. You don't really see many maps trying to emulate its design, but to deny its influence also feels wrong. This is likely due to the fact that the gameplay of Garry's Mod is so unique, so the perfect map for this game is going to look very unique as well. Having a map that can suit so many different styles of play at once is a tall order, but I think they did it really well. And I think it's pretty safe to say this map will go down in history as one of the best sandbox maps of all.
Time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again?